Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 541 of the Duke Basketball Roundup podcast. This might be the first time that I got it right on the first try. I am your host for this episode. I'm Sam Klein. Coming to you from Boston, I am joined, as always, by Donald Wine and Jason Evans. I guess I'm the one that's the not as always. You two are the as always. Donald Wine, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. It's a nice, beautiful, damn near perfect day here in Washington, D.C. Fall has arrived, thankfully, and I hope it stays forever.
Get yourself a pumpkin spice latte. Jason Evans is here.
No spice, no latte. Well, maybe the latte, but no pumpkin spice.
I don't like pumpkin spice. I'm not on the pumpkin spice train. Guys, I want to say it's a nice distraction. I'm enjoying talking to the two of you. It's been a it's been a rough few days for me. As most folks here know, I work at CNN, and ever since Saturday, I've been on call and working long hours covering the terrible, terrible stuff that's happening in the Middle East regarding Israel. And this is I don't want to talk about it extensively, but this is a nice distraction. So thanks, guys.
Hey, real quick, Jason, I know it's been a difficult few days for you, and I think it's accentuated by your perspective because of the fact that you do the news and you do CNN International of all things. It's not like you're
right
in sports, which would be a great distraction because we've had a lot of sports to discuss lately. But just, sending thoughts to you, and I know you've been connected to this on a personal level. So we're sending our thoughts to you and to everyone that has been affected by this, because this is terrible. It's something that should never happen, and unfortunately, it's the stark reality of the world that we live in, is that this is something that we have to deal with, and you kind of have to deal with twice being in the news. So, I just want to put that out there.
I've got family over in Israel, and it's pretty scary, all the stuff that's going on right now. So I'll take Jason's line of let's do the sports thing and be a bit of a distraction for the moment.
Yeah.
And we're I'm thinking about it, and we're mostly worrying about it alongside all the other sort of normal things in life. So with the inability to transition in any logical way.
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it, man. Make that segue.
Yeah. So Duke plays NC State in football this weekend. Blue Devils, of course. So we'll talk about NC State, that game. We'll do that before the break. After the break, we'll get into a couple other notes, one of which is football related, a couple of which are basketball related. So if you're a basketball only, you can skip ahead, but hopefully you're not. Hopefully at this point, despite the loss to Notre Dame, Duke football is still hot, still ranked.
I'm declaring this a no skip podcast. This is a no skip episode.
Don't skip. Duke football still ranked. Duke football still sights on. Look, if you want to be super optimistic about this, no reason that Duke football can't win the ACC at this point. They're undefeated in conference. They've got one win over a very good team, and they've got another good team, not not one of the elite ACC teams, but another good team coming up on the schedule this weekend. That is NC State. NC State is 4-2, and the big headline for Duke that I think we'll discuss first is we don't know if Riley Leonard is going to be playing in this game. The latest reports are that Riley Leonard is day-to-day. There is, I suppose, a chance that he could play against NC State. If he doesn't, Henry Bellin is the backup, and he would be on the roster for Duke against NC State. Jason, I'm going to hand it to you first. What do you think about not the rest of the game? Just tell me about the quarterback situation and sort of where you are right now with the Riley Leonard thing. And is he going to come back this week? Is he going to just get his reps in so that he can play Florida State? Is the return later? And what impact does that have on Mike Elko's team?
Well, I mean, you said he's day to day. Mike Elko said he's day to day, and they said he was month to month. That I would have believed that. I mean, the notion that he, will even be back next week for Florida State seems almost bonkers considering a high ankle sprain. But Mike Elko said this is a guy, Riley Leonard is a guy who's just attacking his rehab, that he's just super driven, and there's a possibility we see him. I was already for the start, perhaps short term, but the start of the Henry Bellin, the fourth era. But it looks like it's possible Riley Leonard will play. I still think it's doubtful. I just feel like probably the safest thing to do for Duke's season is to have Riley Leonard fully healthy when he comes back. Let's not forget, I mean, Sam, you mentioned, Duke's undefeated in the ACC, has a chance to win the conference, and that's absolutely true. Duke has a gauntlet of a schedule. This season's schedule for Duke is about as hard as you could possibly construct it. We still have road games against Florida State, Louisville, and North Carolina, all three of whom are ranked and ranked pretty highly. In the case of Florida State and North Carolina, ranked ahead of Duke. Road games against those three teams. So not that NC State is someone to be overlooked, not that we should assume this is a victory, not by any stretch of the imagination should we assume that, but I think you're more likely to see Henry Bellin in this game and have Riley Leonard get a little more healthy, because a big part of Riley Leonard's game is the running, and if he's hurt, he's not going to be able to run the same way. So as far as Henry Bellin goes, the reputation on him is that he's got a big arm. He's known for deep throws much more than Riley Leonard is. He want to repeat, he will not be the runner that Riley Leonard is. I'm not saying that Henry Bellin is like chained to the pocket and unable to move. Not at all. But Riley's ability to stay upright when he's hit, his ability to see the angles and turn busted plays into 10, 20, 30-yard gains, that's just really unlikely to happen, I think, with Henry Bellin. I'd love to be surprised. I would love to be surprised, but I think that's unlikely with Bellin. But I think you're going to get more of a vertical game out of Bellin. And then the other thing to look for in terms of the quarterback not matchup, but the quarterbacks from on the Duke side is there's no discounting the fact that Riley Leonard has all this experience, and that Henry Bellin, assuming he starts, assuming he plays early against NC State, it will be the first time he's played in a competitive game. He's played a little bit for Duke, but it's always been at mop-up time in games that were essentially over. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not Duke plays it safe and goes to like a grounded out on the ground run game, or if they really turn Henry Bellin loose and let him work the ball downfield as he's known for. And the last thing I'd say related to injuries on Duke's side, and we got a ton of NC State stuff we can talk about, but in terms of injuries for Duke, left tackle Graham Barton will be back for this game. He missed the Notre Dame game. We've mentioned this before. This is a guy who will be playing on Sundays. This is a guy who, and most people think, will absolutely be a starter in the NFL, and perhaps a very good starter in the NFL. Missing that guy against Notre Dame mattered. It mattered a lot. And having him back will be huge for Henry Bellin, assuming Bellin's the starter.
It'll be huge for anybody who lines up under center. Graham Barton is that good. And yeah, we missed him 2 weeks ago against Notre Dame. It was very apparent that Notre Dame exploited that side of the offensive line, knowing that, a potential first round pick was missing. So I think Duke fans can feel okay in saying that there is a sense of optimism when you hear that Riley Leonard is day to day. There should be, because we saw what happened against Notre Dame. We saw the injury, and the fact that it went from high ankle sprain, minimum 6 weeks, to day in the span of a week and a half is a terrific, update. Having said that, in this case, optimism does not equal expectation. I do not expect to see Riley Leonard this week for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, Jason. Mainly, again, he becomes one-dimensional if he can't run. And part of what makes him so dangerous is the fact that he can put the ball, quote, on the ground and run if he gets into trouble in the pocket. And he also has the ability to beat you deep. If you're limiting him to one dimension, then you're limiting him as a player. And that really, it hurts him as a player and it hurts the team. And I think it's best to make sure that he's 100%, because, again, while we're not looking ahead, like you said, Jason, we have a huge set of games coming up starting with this Saturday. And I think we have a couple games on national TV late at night, 8:00, prime time starts over the next couple of weeks. And I think we want to have a team that's 100%, because I think a 100% Duke beats NC State. We don't need a 75 or maybe even a 60% Riley Leonard to beat NC State. So if he's only 75 or 80%, let's get him back to 100%, put Beelan in there, and I think this team can still go and take on the Wolfpack.
Hey, by the way, I think perhaps that FanDuel, the betting website FanDuel, I think they think Riley Leonard's going to play, because I looked, and every other sportsbook out there, Vegas, Atlantic City, wherever it may be, has Duke as about a 3.5 to 4 point favorite in this game. Not a big favorite, 3.5 to 4 points. FanDuel has Duke as a 9.5 point favorite. Total outlier from everyone else. I have to think that they think Riley Leonard's going to play, because if you put Riley Leonard out there for this game, I think Duke is a 9.5, 10 point favorite. Without Riley Leonard, just the uncertainty of what Henry Beelan will be like, that's where you knock it down to that 3.5, 4 point favorite. So I think FanDuel thinks Riley Leonard's going to play.
Or it means that you should get on FanDuel and hammer NC State. Because they're working with the wrong knowledge.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about NC State a little bit. This is an interesting team. Like I said, not the top of the conference, but not too shabby either. I mentioned NC State is 4-2 on the season. They've got two common opponents with Duke, neither of whom is a conference opponent. So that is like an interesting thing when you're sort of looking at matchups and trying to understand how things might be different, in that NC State has played both Connecticut and Notre Dame, as Duke has, and those games turned out worse for NC State than they did for Duke. So if you want to take some directional enthusiasm for this one, now obviously Duke has Riley Leonard for all of those games, likely does not have Riley Leonard this weekend. NC State, meanwhile, has had its own troubles at quarterback. And so one of the interesting storylines, NC State replaced their starting quarterback last week for the game against Marshall. But so that's MJ Morris, who started for NC State last week. But prior to that, Brendan Armstrong had been the starter. So Donald, what do you make of NC State making the switch at quarterback, and any other sort of interesting topics from this game that you think Duke fans should be looking out for?
Well, first of all, and I'm going to joke when I say this, but it means they're scared. It means Duke can't handle Duke. They have to make a switch. That's really what it means. And we should take this as multiple material, that they have the disrespect to switch quarterbacks because they think that they have a leg up on us. No, I think honestly, it's the change has been, it's weird. NC State has been this team that came in with a little bit of expectations to kind of compete in the ACC, and they haven't really met those expectations fully. They had a couple of games that, got away from them. That Notre Dame game, I thought, was one where I think the weather kind of affected their play, and then Notre Dame came out and just busted the doors off of them. But at the end of the day, I think for Duke, we just have to kind of put the heartbreak of Notre Dame behind us. We've had a week to do so. And I think what's great about this coaching staff is they've been looking forward every single time, kind of not necessarily in a basketball next play type of mentality, but it's still like, hey, next opponent up, we got way too much season left to worry about the last 40 seconds of the game 2 weeks ago. Let's put it all into getting a good victory again at home. We get to play at home before we have 2 games on the road, so it's a good way for us to focus. We'll have a good crowd there on Saturday, and I think Duke just needs to play their game, limit the turnovers, limit the big plays on defense, and on offense, find your pockets. Beelan does not have to be a hero. He does not have to play like a Heisman quarterback. He just has to play like Henry Beelan and let everybody get the ball into the hands of the skill players who can do their thing. I think the biggest key is the running game. If we don't have Riley Leonard, then the running game, the running backs are going to have to step up and get back to the ways that they were doing early in the season, where they were racking up a bunch of yards and moving the chain. So again, there's a lot of things that can go right for this team. But the one thing is, if Duke plays like Duke, we should beat Notre Dame or beat NC State, and we should then be able to look ahead to the gauntlet that is ahead of us.
Donald, you mentioned big plays. That is such a huge part of what the NC State offense is with MJ Morris at quarterback against Marshall. And by the way, it's worth pointing out that Marshall game, NC State won that game 48-41. Marshall had been undefeated coming into that game. Now, let's be clear, they're not like a top Power 5 conference team, but Marshall is a pretty good mid-major, or whatever you want to call those schools that are a little bit smaller. And for NC State to put up 48 points on them is impressive. They also gave up 41, so that's not as, but 48 points is a big number, and they did it with big plays. NC State had 4 plays go for 35 plus yards against Marshall, including a 62-yard touchdown pass. And we mentioned MJ Morris, the new quarterback for them. He had 4 touchdown passes, and he just brought the ball downfield again and again and again. Sort of somewhat similar to Henry Beelan. Morris has a big arm. He loves to throw it deep downfield. Does not have a good completion percentage. He was just 17 of 32 against Marshall. And if you look elsewhere in his career, he's played several games for NC State. Played 3 games last year late in the season when their other quarterback got hurt. So this is a guy who's reasonably experienced. We have some numbers on him. And MJ Morris is a guy who he doesn't throw great accurate balls like in the short mid-range game, but the dude's going to fling it downfield. I think State, by the way, relies on the pass much more than the rush. I think they play into Duke's hands really nicely. We have a really, really good defensive backfield. Our defensive line does a nice job of getting after the quarterback. Look, I've talked about on this podcast the fact that the Duke defensive backfield forces an inordinate number of incompletions, that quarterbacks struggle to get to even 50% completion rate against Duke. I mean, quarterbacks who are usually in the 60s and 70s barely get to 50. And MJ Morris is not a guy who's usually in the 60s and 70s. So I think he may really struggle with pass completions against Duke. And like I said, State's not a good run game. And then, Donald, one other thing I wanted to highlight, because you mentioned it, the Duke rush attack versus the NC State defensive line. To me, that's this ball game, because Duke has a really strong run game. Duke averages close to 5 yards per rush. NC State, their defensive line is perhaps the strongest part of their team. They average 3.5 sacks per game, and they only give up 3 yards per rush. The NC State D-line is where they are best. And it's going to be a really interesting, irresistible force against immovable object kind of situation with the Duke run game against the ends, especially with Graham Barton being back for Duke on the offensive line. Duke's offensive line, essentially against State's defensive line, is a big part of this game. Last thing I want to mention about NC State, this is a team that is incredibly banged up in the defensive backfield. That they weren't expected to be great. Their defensive backs and safeties weren't expected to be great anyway. And several of their guys are banged up, perhaps out, certainly not, moving at full strength. It'll be interesting to see whether it's Beelan or Leonard, but I think Duke's wide receivers may really find themselves open because that's one of State's biggest weaknesses.
All right. And as we mentioned, looking ahead, 2 weeks ago, Duke has Notre Dame in primetime in Durham. This game, primetime in Durham, it's on ACC Network. So not exactly the same as being College Game Day, et cetera, but it is under the lights. And we know that right after this game, Duke's going to turn around and get ready to play at Florida State, also in primetime. We don't know what channel that game's going to be on, but Duke has to get used to playing in these late spots. This is part of the price of being a competitive team. And like you guys said, NC State's got they're not the top of the conference. They've been a little disappointing this season, but I think the performance against Marshall tells you that they are, at least on offense, a little rejuvenated by the change at quarterback, and that might end up working out very well for them, down the home stretch. one last thing about this game before we go to break. This NC State game is something that had become something of a rarity for Duke over the last few years, given the conference alignment and the way that the ACC was split into the Atlantic Division and the Coastal Division for many years. Now that system has gone away. So maybe just a minute, Jason, on how great it is for Duke to be playing NC State, which is, talk realignment all you want, but isn't it important for Duke to be able to play NC State and North Carolina and Wake Forest every year?
Good God, yes, it is. Yes, thank you, Sam. And the great Jim Sumner, folks, we say this all the time. If you don't subscribe to Jim Sumner's Duke newsletter, or Substack, whatever it is, you're making a huge mistake, because he just has troves and troves of fabulous stuff. He pointed out today that Duke and NC State between 1923 and 2003, over the course of 80 years, Duke and NC State played 79 out of 80 years. The only year they missed was 1944, where no one played any sports because they're afraid of World War II and potential attacks and stuff like that. So they played every year essentially that they could from 1923 to 2003. Since 2003, Duke has played NC State 4 times. We're talking about schools that are 25 miles apart in the same conference. They played 4 times in the past 20 years. That's ridiculous. I hate it. It's awful. But as Sam noted, we are finally getting back to playing NC State every year, because the new conference schedule, I guess starting this year, is that Duke will play UNC, NC State, and Wake Forest every single season going forward. I don't care whatever happens with expansion. I know they're going to have to adjust things when we add Stanford and Cal. Please, sports gods, allow us to play NC State, Wake, and UNC every single season. It should always be that way. Last thing, really quick. Do you guys remember what happened the last time State came to Durham? The year was 2013.
No, it was like 1993.
It was 2013. It was 2013.
It was 2013, and Duke scored like 3 touchdowns in a minute and a half or something.
Devon Edwards. It's the Devon Edwards game.
Oh, the Devon Edwards game. Yeah.
He had 3 touchdowns. He returned a kickoff for a touchdown, and then in the fourth quarter, on back-to-back plays, I repeat, on back-to-back plays, Devon Edwards had pick sixes that he took back to the house. It was a close game.
That's like that game. I remember that's a record that, like, I don't know will ever be touched ever again. Like,
well, there apparently there are a couple other guys who've done it, but Devon Edwards was the first. Anyway,
but he added the kickoff return. Back-to-back pick sixes is one thing, but he added the kickoff return to it. I don't think that's ever being touched.
You're right.
But it's great that they're playing NC State again, and the fact that it's going to take place with more regularity. The only thing that needs to, continue is, NC State and UNC have to want to stay in the ACC with us. That would be nice. But as long as that happens, we'll get to see these matchups every year now.
If NC State ends up in the Big Ten or the SEC and Duke is left out, I'm going to be upset.
Yeah.
I
put it on record.
I want that known. Hey guys, let's take a quick break. On the backside, we have a couple other topics to cover, so stick around.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
We are back, and before we talk basketball, one more football topic to discuss here today. There was a great article in The Athletic this week highlighting the job that Mike Elko has done in his first year and a half or so in Durham as the Duke head coach. So, Jason, why don't you give me the highlights from this great piece on Mike Elko, and really, the page that'll get stapled to the front of his resume when he goes and interviews for Big Ten jobs this offseason.
Well, I think part of the purpose of this article was sort of be like, hey, by the way, this is a name you're going to hear a lot of. whenever there's a major opening. I mean, that sort of tone was woven throughout the whole thing, but also woven throughout the whole thing was sort of Mike Elko is not a guy with an ego. Mike Elko is not a guy who's like, I need to coach at the biggest, baddest university around. He comes across incredibly down to earth in this, not showy, not egotistical at all. A lot of amusing stories about his relationship with his wife and how, she's the same kind of personality. These are not folks who need to be on the biggest, brightest stage. They just want to be someplace where they can feel like they can succeed. And it sure sounds like he feels like that way about Duke. I loved the all this talk that he might go someplace else, but also there was just all this talk that he is very happy here. And he's a guy he played football at University of Pennsylvania in the Ivy League. He coached at Wake and Notre Dame earlier in his career. And there are a number of references to the fact that he values being at a school with some academic pride. I'm not saying for sure he's going to stick around if some SEC program comes and offers him $12 million a year or something insane like that. It's hard to turn that kind of thing down. But it sounds like he really likes being at Duke and that he feels like he can be incredibly successful with Duke. It's such a great article. And the last thing I would say about it is the mere fact that this article is out there is a huge thing for Duke football. Like, no one used to write about us in football except we suck. Like, oh, Duke's we were part of the conversation whether we're the worst Power 5 team in the country. And now they're writing articles about how great our coach is and and how we are this program that everyone recognizes is going to be a factor going forward. And thank you, David Cutcliffe, for rescuing us from being moribund for years and years. And thank you, Mike Elko. It feels like Elko is now taking it next level.
I think the one thing, also it gave a little bit of insight into how he runs the program, right? Even, he talked about that first practice where that first off-season workout where a couple of guys showed up 20 minutes late and they, made him do what he called an accountability workout afterwards, which we all know what that is. They ran for days. But again, he was like,
by the way, they pointed out never again. That happened once and then
happened one time, right? But just the fact that, again, that just led for the players to buy in to things. He asked the players about their nutrition and, upgraded their bedding. Like, they have different beds now in their dorm rooms. Like those little things, those details that endear yourself to players, but also makes the players respond by they're sleeping in better beds, which means they recover better, which means they can work out harder, longer, faster, stronger, all those things. Right. But also he, really took pride in understanding what the players needed and got it from the players themselves. He didn't come in with this, a lot of coaches, and rightfully so, some coaches come in with an air of respect and they come in and say, hey, look, we're going to do things my way. We're going to change this program up. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Elko came in with that respect saying, hey, we want to change some things up, but I want to get first a sense of where we are. And he mentioned for the strength program, he said, I don't want racers, I want boxers, right? He wants guys that can outlast anyone in a fight. And he basically said, hey guys, how do we want to structure this program so that we get you to what we want, but we're doing it at the level that you guys need? And I like that back and forth between him and some of those players that help kind of shape this buy-in. Because again, you can come in and say all you want and coach all you want and do all these things, but if the players don't buy in, it means nothing. The players immediately bought in, and that's why we've seen such great success in the first year and a half of the Elko era. And I think I'm with you guys. I think with a lot of people, this ride will end at some point, right? Like it's going to end. We hope it's 30 years from now. We hope all these raises that he keeps getting, the $12 million a year, people coming in and offering. We hope that one day that we're in a position where we can say, hey, we'll give you that money, just stay here. And it sounds like, at least for right now, that his family are very happy in Durham. They don't plan on leaving. And as much as the players have bought into this program, they have also bought into this program. And I think that's made for a wonderful pair.
It's interesting to reflect on the articles that they wrote about David Cutcliffe from 15 years ago when he came in as the Duke coach and all the changes that he made from the Ted Roof era. It's crazy to think that the Ted Roof era was only 2 administrations ago for Duke, considering how far the program has come from there.
I blotted it out of my memory.
Yeah, right.
Ted Roof coaches at Oklahoma. So I saw him on TV the other day and I was like, oh, wow, blast from the past. Because again, it doesn't seem that long ago, but it seems eons ago when it comes to how far this program's come.
It's like how Jim Knowles is now like one of the hottest defensive coordinators in college football. And when he was the defensive coordinator at Duke, our defense was terrible. So I don't know. Maybe we had bad recruiting or something.
He learned a lot about what not to do.
Yeah, clearly. Like man's been falling up the whole way. No, I shouldn't talk too much smack about him. He was one of my bosses when I worked there. So but the numbers are the numbers. In any event, when Coach Cutcliffe came in, you guys will remember this probably as well as I do. There was all this talk about changing nutrition and the setup of the building and all these kind of topics that it sounds like, I don't know, fell into disrepair, or what I imagine happened is that other programs just built so much faster because there's so much more money in college football now that when David Cutcliffe came in 2008, he looked around and was like, none of this is up to snuff. He got it all up to snuff. Things kind of, I don't know that things got worse, but they didn't continue getting better. And Mike Elko came in and said, wow, things are not up to snuff. And we were like going through the whole process again. So it really shows you how much college football has changed just in, the last 15, 20 years, and how much more professional the whole setup has become. But yeah, I think the big takeaway for me here is just how much how lucky we are to have gotten this guy that I don't even think, it's not like Mike Elko was like Duke's first pick for head coach. I think Nina King went through a number of candidates here before she landed on him. And what a great outcome that has been for Duke.
I was just going to say, the attention to detail, I think, is what's changed, right? You mentioned, Cutcliffe coming in and kind of changing around the facilities and upgrading the facilities. They'd only been open for 4 or 5 years before he showed up. And that was just how quickly the college football arms race, so to speak, was working at that time. And it's still working. It might be 3 times as fast now, but to stay in effect, and again, working for little details like, hey, we're not going to make it where players at Duke University are any, better or treated any differently, or at least on a higher level than that of the regular student. So they're going to be in the dorms. But hey, college football players are much bigger than the average college student. So maybe we should get them some better beds. Like those little things, again, will help their bodies recover, which helps them become better athletes because they will be able to go to the max every single day and be able to know that they have the resources and the accommodations to quickly recover and get ready for the next thing. Let's come full circle. These might be the things that Riley Leonard uses to be ready weeks before we anticipated him being ready if it was a normal injury in a normal time at Duke University. Now they have the resources for him to be able to recover 24/7, be able to sleep in a nice bed, be able to have a nice meal, to have these nutritional things and the workout plans that make it where he will come back stronger, and we can anticipate his timely return in a week or two as opposed to a month or two. And I think those are the difference between a 4-8 season and an 8-4 or a 9-3 season.
Guys, let's talk a little bit of basketball before we get out of here. This is the Duke Basketball Roundup. The first item here was a report this week by John Rothstein that Duke and St. John's are in advanced talks to play a game against each other at Arthur Ashe Stadium next year. So Duke plays at Madison Square Garden frequently, almost every year. And if Duke doesn't play at MSG, they're playing at the Barclays Center, they're playing at the Meadowlands, they're playing somewhere in the New York, New Jersey area. The discussion now is that the Duke St. John's game won't fit at Madison Square Garden, so they're going to have to send it to Arthur Ashe Stadium, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is an outdoor facility.
It has a roof.
They have a retractable
It has
roof.
a roof.
You can see out the top.
Yeah, if they want you to. Yeah.
So that should be interesting. But Jason, your reaction to the potential for Duke to play in New York next year, but in Queens?
I think this is really cool. First of all, I mean, obviously you'll get all the old man Patino against young upstart John Shire stories. That'll be fun. This is going to be a high profile national TV game because of the venue. I mean, Arthur Ashe Stadium would be a truly unique venue. I think someone said that there's been there was a WNBA game played there. I don't think there's been any other basketball played there. other than this WNBA contest. So
There's been an NBA preseason game played in, I think it was like Arizona or something. It was at a different tennis complex,
right.
but similar. Yeah.
Yeah. But specifically at Arthur Ashe Stadium, which, it's just because of the venue, it's going to be a high profile game. There are a lot of Duke fans, obviously, in the area. It's a place where we recruit a lot. So being in the headlines like this will be really great. And I'm thrilled that Rick Pitino is getting St. John's back to national relevance. St. John's is such a storied program, and this is a good thing for college basketball to have a program in New York City that is watchable and fun and interesting. I'm sure that everybody will turn out for a Duke St. John's game in Flushing Meadows. It's like, wow.
Arthur Ashe Stadium is like a cathedral of tennis. It's one of the you can consider it a cathedral of all of these random sports that we play here in the United States and around the world. It's phenomenal to be considered for something like that, and it's really cool to kind of be part of you can call it a gimmick event, but it's cool to be kind of part of one of those. We've seen the guys playing outdoor on the blacktop. We've seen them playing on aircraft carriers and things like that. To play in the greatest tennis stadium in the country would be completely awesome. I'd love to see this live. I've never been to Flushing Meadows, so this would be a nice way to get me out there. Yeah, I should probably go to the US Open, but no, I'd go for a Duke basketball game. Absolutely. So this will be pretty cool, and hopefully it happens.
Yeah, I think this is extremely cool. And I'm like you, Donald. I've never been, despite the fact that going to the US Open seems like one of the most fun
events,
sporting events to get to. I haven't made it happen yet. So in a way, why waste my first trip to Arthur Ashe not going to the US Open? On the other hand, there's always another place to see a Duke basketball game. So that's pretty cool too. I think we were trying to time recording here around news from the Kansas basketball fallout. Jason, I guess at this point, nothing to report.
Yeah, no. So Kansas was supposed to find out today, and they probably will find out today. It's like 2:15 now, East Coast time, and we haven't gotten news of this yet. I'm sure by the end of the day we will hear about Kansas's infractions case. It stems from an investigation that began in 2017. Eventually, 5 level 1 violations were handed down to Kansas or alleged against Kansas. Kansas went before the IARP, which is the Independent Accountability Resolution Process Board, and to get all this stuff decided. It involves a couple players who were paid a couple $1,000s each by an Adidas representative to attend Kansas. Let's be clear that the things that are alleged to have happened illegally here would be perfectly legal today.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy about this is that this is still ongoing in the world where like everyone's totally fine with this now.
Yeah, exactly. So here's what I'll say about it. First of all, the IARP is a joke. It's been disbanded by the NCAA. This is the board that is handing down the penalties to Kansas. It's been disbanded by the NCAA because it took too long to get anything done. Again, this investigation started in 2017. The allegations were put forth in 2019. We're here in 2023, and we still don't know how it all turned out. That's absurd. That's just too long for justice to happen. And so, like I said, the IARP is being taken away. The other thing is the IARP turned out to be worthless because they just don't like to hand out penalties. So they don't like to penalize players today for things that players did illegally in the past. And while in principle, I kind of agree with that, Kansas broke the rules. Let's be very clear. Kansas absolutely broke the rules. The most sacrosanct, the most sacred rule in college athletics for a long, long time until they made it legal. You're not allowed to pay the players. And Kansas absolutely paid players to attend Kansas. And I think it's horrible. I'm going to go ahead and project that the IARP is not going to slap serious penalties on Kansas or Bill Self. By the way, some of the allegations specifically relate to Bill Self's supervision of the Kansas program. The IARP is not going to hand down serious penalties here. I just know they're not. And I'll already say I'm outraged in advance because
preliminarily.
I'm preliminarily outraged because they deserve penalties. They broke the rules. There's no question about it. It's the most important rule around at the time, at least. And, oh well. I'm glad we'll be done with the IIRP after this, and I'm glad that we're done with this ridiculous era that lasted for 100 or so years of not paying college players. But the joke now, by the way, is that Kansas pays college players more than anybody else. Like
I was gonna say they just kept it, now that it's legal, like, oh, we're just gonna, they people joke that they already had the operation ready, right? Like they've been testing it out for decades, so they weren't able to have a very low learning curve. But Jason, I think to your point about them failing to punish players who are currently playing for past transgressions, it's like the same rationale we've seen in a lot of cases, most notably the UNC case, which covered 20 years, right? Like, and they said, oh, well, we can't really punish the guys that are here because it didn't, and they were closer to the point, right? They were less further removed than Kansas is at this point, because it's been, as you mentioned, it's been about 7 years. There's no one on campus, short of the coaching staff, that was there in 2016. But in the case of UNC, there were players that were still on the team, and they were like, oh, well, we can't punish the guys who weren't involved in this. I think that's like a cop out, and so I'm going to join you in the Shamakari parade once this comes down, and they probably say Kansas is not going to do anything. We reserve the right to be wrong, and if they're wrong, we'll talk about it on the next show. But I think, yeah, it's the end of an era, but also at the same time, it kind of set them up to do what they're doing right now and be ready for the changing time. And yeah, it's almost going to be like they're being rewarded at a certain point for this taking so long, that it got to a point now where they can get whoever they want because they're securing the bag.
So the great irony of this case is that Kansas is potentially in trouble. Again, they're not going to get in trouble. Potentially they're in trouble because some guy allegedly got $2,500, again, $2,500 to attend Kansas. It's believed by most people that Hunter Dickinson will be receiving more than $1 million to play for Kansas this year. This is how crazy the system is. Anyway, hey, more power to him.
One more topic before we get out of here. It's a long way off because he's not going to be in college for a couple of years, but the top high school player who had been classified as a sophomore this year, AJ DeBonsa, has reclassified as a junior, which means he is now in Cam Boozer's class. Duke is not officially listed as a school with interest in him, although
Duke's interested. Trust me, Duke's interested.
This guy is he's the man. The latest recruiting rankings say that he and Cam Boozer, he is now the number one player in the junior class, and Cam Boozer's now number two. Since, as we recall, Cooper Flagg reclassified from that class into the senior class. So it's hard to keep track of the years and the ages of all these guys. But AJ DeBonsa he's a hot commodity. Everyone would like to have him the same way that everyone would like to have Cam Boozer. He's the kind of player that you make room on the roster for, sort of no matter what. And now he's in the junior class. So he is now only, a year and a half away from coming to Duke instead of 2 years away from him.
Yeah. So the thing about AJ DeBonsa that is so impressive. So while we talked a lot a couple months ago at the Peach Jam about how Cooper Flagg and Cameron Boozer were putting up crazy statistics. Cooper Flagg was just dominating, playing against other sophomores. And then Cooper Flagg classified up a year. And so now he's, or I guess they were rising juniors. Now he's playing with, you follow what I'm saying. So AJ DeBonsa was a year behind Cooper and Cameron, and he played up 2 years. He played up with the class of 2024 guys. Again, he was 26, playing with the class of 2024 guys, and he was the best player in the class of 2024. He averaged almost 26 points per game at the Peach Jam. Like absurd, incredible. This guy's one of the great scorers that we've ever seen at the high school level. Of course, he reclassified. His birthday makes it so that he'd be eligible for the draft a year early, so he's going to get to college a year early. Of course, and everyone and their brother wants to get this guy. He's a super exciting, super interesting recruit. I'm sure that Duke will get involved.
I'm sorry, this man averaged 26 points per game, and I'm supposed to be impressed by that? Like, that's nothing, Jason. Every guy who goes to the Peach Jam that we've talked about on this show has averaged like 20 points a game. I'm kidding.
No.
Give me 26 points per game right now. I don't care what year he is in high school. He could reclassify and come to this team today if he wants to. We'll find a way to put him on the floor. That's how good this guy is.
Yeah, the big question with him is if everyone in high school was eligible for the NBA draft right now today, would he or Cooper Flagg go number one in the NBA draft? And there are a lot of people who thinks that Dibansa would go number one.
All right. I think that's it for today. We're looking forward to the NC State game this weekend. Hopefully Duke bounces back from the Notre Dame loss with a victory over the Wolfpack. We'll be back sometime after that to recap, get you ready for the Florida State game the following week. And by the way, Countdown to Craziness is right around the corner. So get hyped. Fall is here, which means that basketball season is not long off yet. For Jason Evans, I should have remembered. Send us emails, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Go buy the Home Field apparel. Donald, what's the code that the people can use for Home Field?
DBR Podcast. Very simple.
DBR Podcast. It's the same as the email. It's so easy. Go buy Home Field. We love it. They sent us gift cards. So that's awesome.
We haven't used yet because we have to figure out what we want.
I haven't decided if I'm buying more shirts or a core zip, but got to get something. So we love them, and we love all of you. We being Jason Evans, Donald Wine. I'm Sam Klein. This has been Duke Basketball Roundup, episode 541. Duke Band, take us home.
I got McDonald's for the first time in like willingly got McDonald's for the first time in like 2 years.
What was that like?
It was fine. I tried that Mambo sauce, like the nugget sauce that they just came out with, and
are they calling it Mambo sauce?
They're calling it Mambo sauce. It is not Mambo sauce.
I was gonna say it's bold.
It's bold strategy. The chili jam one is just like jam with some with maybe some cayenne pepper in it. It didn't taste great at all. But I also wasn't expecting it to taste great. I just got it, new shiny piece of candy. I got it.
You know what I had recently for the first time was the Wendy's ghost pepper fries.
Oh, how were they?
Pretty good.
The thing is, like, ghost pepper,
those scare me.
Nah,
ghost pepper comes with a certain expectation, and when it's Wendy's, I know that expectation is gone because they're not going to have real ghost pepper in there. They'll spice everybody out of it. Like, no one will ever try it again.
Right.
Ghost pepper is supposed to make you hack up, things that you didn't know you had.
Can you hear me eating my bagel, or is it kind of quiet?
I can tell when you have food in your mouth, but I can't hear you eating.
Well, yeah, you can tell when I'm talking about food in my mouth. I understand that.